Hello, my name is Emma Beaujolais, and today I'm going to be talking about the causes and consequences of waste. So there's two major causes of waste, and that's going to be the lack of proper waste management systems and human activities. Starting with lack of proper waste management systems, it usually comes from the limited separation of waste sites, poor waste collection services, and a reliance on unmanaged landfills and dump sites. So a lot of the time waste is just going to get grouped together like waste and recycling and isn't disposed of properly. And then there are a lot of cities that don't have the funds to create proper waste collection services, which leads to communities suffering from like illnesses because the waste is piling up. And a lot of the time it's easier and cheaper for companies and corporations to use illegal dumping sites and unmanaged landfills because it's cheaper. Next, we're going to talk about human activities. So that's going to be industrialization, urbanization, consumption patterns, and food waste. Consumption patterns are going to be like when we stop consuming something and then it ends up turning into waste. So, like if we used to eat a lot of peanut butter is being produced, but then Nutella comes out and all of a sudden we want to eat a lot of Nutella. So less peanut butter is being purchased and in turn is being turned into waste because we're buying more Nutella. And I want to go a little bit more into detail on food waste. So food waste is a lot of the time going to be organic waste, so agricultural waste or like kitchen and cooking scraps. In that is going to be fruits and vegetables. They actually have the greatest wastage rates at about 40 to 50% because it becomes difficult to compost them because they require additives. There is an additive called polyhalite, and polyhalite enriched compost can significantly improve composting efficiency and the nutrient content of the final product, particularly benefiting plant growth. INAL 2025. So this is going to make it easier to compost it and give us less waste. Next, I'm going to talk about ecological consequences of waste. There's a lot of different ones, but I decided to focus on these four, which are water pollution, air pollution, soil pollution, and plastic pollution. Oil pollution, that's going to come from oil spills, from mishandled waste being dumped from corporations and businesses because it's cheaper to illegally dump it. Air pollution is going to come from the decomposition of solid waste from incineration because it can emit greenhouse gases and will in turn speed up climate change. Like methane is going to be produced, and that's not very good. And then with soil pollution, when solid waste is decomposed, it's not always decomposed properly, so it can damage the soil, which then makes it difficult to continue agricultural practices that feed hundreds of people. In plastic pollution, I wanted to focus on this one just a little bit more. Plastic pollution is going to come from poor recycling systems, improper dumping practices, and a heavy reliance on one-use plastic products. Recycling isn't always properly sorted and disposed of because it can be cheaper to toss it into landfills than to just get rid of it the proper way. The reliance on plastic, especially one-use plastic products, has skyrocketed since 2020 due to COVID and the fear of spreading it. So the largest concentration of production and consumption of plastic within the global plastic market is going to come from Asia, which is followed by Europe and then North America. 50% of the concentration of production and consumption of plastic is going to come from Asia, with 29% of it coming from China, 4% from Japan, and then 17% from an accumulation of the remaining Asian countries. Europe is going to come in at 19%, with the largest concentration in Western Europe. And the United States, or North America, which is mostly just the United States and Canada in this sense, is going to come in at 18%. So the United States, China, and Europe do generate the most plastic waste. The United States generates 21% of plastic waste. Europe and China both generate 19%. And then 41% of the world accumulates the rest, or generates the rest of the plastic waste. And then in OECD countries, which are Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, they mostly manage their plastic waste by landfilling and incineration, which are two of the better practices for handling plastic waste other than recycling it. And then in non-OECD countries, their plastic waste is mostly managed by littering and the mismanagement of the waste. Next, I'm going to talk about some social consequences of waste. First one I'm going to talk about is stigmas on waste work. I feel a lot of the time that workers in the waste field are seen as less than due to stigmas that it's for low lives or dirty people, which I feel is mostly targeted towards immigrants that work in the waste field as opposed to white people working in the waste field. Specifically, people of color that are in the waste field. Next is impacts on health. So the waste is going to pollute our air, water, and soil, which gets us sick through the spread of sickness and disease, and can harm us by making it increasingly difficult to get clean water or grow crops. And next is going to be social inequality. So that's going to be like the lack of funding for proper waste management systems in poorer areas, so that lower income people are forced to live closer to landfills and polluted areas just because they don't have the same resources as others do. And then throwaway culture. So that's going to be like more consumer patterns. So that can lead to overconsumption, which then leads to products that are perfectly good being thrown away just because people want to move on to a new trend. So then those products end up in landfills and produce more waste. And then next is going to be the future generations. So if we continue to accumulate and mishandle waste the way that we are, people in the future are going to end up needing to relocate to new areas to find things like clean water and undamaged soil, which may not be an option for some, but they're going to have to find those things just so they can survive. Next, I'm going to connect these to some sociological economic theories. So the first one I'm going to look at is ecological modernization theory. I connected that to a circular economy. And waste management programs and systems are created so materials are reused and recycled instead of being discarded, which can create opportunities for green economic growth. With the treadmill of production, I linked this to fast fashion because new collections of clothing, like from Shein and stuff, are constantly being created and produced. And people see that as a sign to buy more. And the material is so cheap that it just wears down so quickly that it's being disposed of faster than it's being broken down. It's not being decomposed before more is being thrown on top of it. And then with ecological Marxism, I connected that to electronic waste. So since profit is prioritized over the health of the environment, a lot of electronic waste from wealthier countries is going to be sent to poorer countries because it's cheaper to dispose of it there. And some wealthier countries, the people running it, just don't really seem to care about how it affects those poorer countries. I also connected e-waste with the world systems theory. Because the e-waste is going to be sent from core countries to periphery countries to try and generate revenue so that these periphery countries can hope to catch up to core countries. And then with risk society, I connected that to agricultural toxins. So when we overspray pesticides on our agriculture, it can make us sick because it becomes extremely toxic and it can cause birth defects, rare illnesses, and cancers. So produce is going to end up being discarded instead of properly consumed, creating more waste. And then with ecofeminism, I connected that to women's health. Because the patriarchy sees women in nature as resources that can be controlled. They don't really care about the health and well-being of women. So when water is contaminated in certain areas and women are going to drink it, their health is going to be affected, like especially reproductive health. And that's kind of taboo in patriarchal sense. A lot of governments don't like to really talk about it, especially the United States government. So they're just seen as being able to be used. So in conclusion, we really have to look at how much waste we are accumulating and mishandling, and think about how much more that our environment can take if we keep going at the speed that we're going at. If we continue to accumulate more waste and not properly take care of it, the earth and our environment isn't going to last much longer.